Those shows have generated about 600 million views and 1.7 billion impressions. So Going Public is a show. It's a show where we follow the stories of founders who are building their businesses and raising capital. The viewers of this show can interact. They can click to invest and buy shares in any of the featured companies while they watch the show. And we just signed our biggest deal ever for this company. The show is now being distributed by X,
Interesting.
Twitter, run by Musk. We have a sponsorship with Linda Yaccarino. She's the CEO who reports to Elon. And she said this is going to be the first business show on X, and it's going to be the biggest show on X.
Welcome to the podcast, where we introduce you to incredible humans who share their journeys with the mission to inspire you to harness your own inner tenacity to drive your life and career forward. And now, your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast, where we're bringing the best and the brightest in the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Folks, my guest today on the podcast is Darren Marble, a true innovator in the world of capital raising and fintech. He is the CEO of Issuance. Did I say that right? Issuance, right? Yeah. Good. Nailed it. Finally. I'm not a great reader. A leading SaaS-based investment platform that's helped companies raise over $300 million in securities investments. With a streamlined mobile-first experience, Issuance is changing the game for online capital raising. But Darren's impact doesn't stop there. He's also the executive producer of Going Public, a groundbreaking original series that puts the power of investing in the hands of viewers, allowing them to click and invest in real time. Season 3 is about to set to stream exclusively on X in the spring of 2025. We have a lot to get into. We're going to unpack his journey and more. Let's get to it. Darren, welcome to the podcast.
I love it, dude. The podcast, very easy to remember. It's a great brand.
It is. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. There was only one choice. My last name is Posner. People mispronounce it as Posner. Not mispronounced, because some people out there who are Posners are Posners. But anyway, long story short, when I was a kid, my nickname was Pos, so podcast.
Perfect.
Done. There was never, ever a second thought. There was never a second thought. Never a second thought. So, Darren, welcome to the show here. We have a lot to get into. When I talk to entrepreneurs like yourself, I always find it interesting because I look at my background. Both my parents are teachers and my brother's in education. I'm like, how the hell did I go down this path here? If you don't mind me asking, what did your parents do for a living? We're gonna unpack the DNA here.
Yes, that's actually a great question. It's the first time I've ever been asked that question. So I already like the start of this podcast. So
there we go.
My mom was a psychologist, or licensed clinical social worker, LCSW. And my dad was a real estate attorney. So neither were technically entrepreneurs, but my mom was a thinker and a relationship manager and a people person. And my dad was in real estate most of his career.
Commercial, residential?
Commercial. And now he is he's somewhat of an entrepreneur. My brother is an entrepreneur on the advertising business, and my dad is his number two. So my dad does all the administration, compliance, legal work for my brother's business.
Interesting. Family. It's funny that my wife is a commercial real estate attorney. So there's definitely over here on the East Coast. We could sidebar that one for afterwards here. So let's get into your entrepreneurial journey for a little bit. And I love asking, like, when you were a kid, was it like a newspaper route? Was it a lemonade stand? Were you selling baseball cards? Where did you first kind of get the itch and the bug and say, you know what, I like making shit happen?
Well, I did do a couple of those things, man, which reveals my age. But I guess, people still do deliver newspapers, of course. But yeah, I was a newspaper delivery boy back in the day. I think it was like my first income when I was like 13 years old. My first sales job was I sold Cutco knives.
I almost got caught into that early right out of college.
Path, man. And it's a cool business because it teaches you how to sell. It teaches you how to ask for the order. It teaches you how to close. And the whole concept is like network marketing. Like, you go to your neighbor who knows you in theory, should know you. You sell your neighbor $50, $100 worth of Cutco knives. And you say, all right, Mrs. Smith, thanks so much for being a customer. If you could write down 10 friends that that might want to talk to me, that'd be great. If you can give me their first name, last name, phone number. So you really quickly kind of learn how to ask and expand your network and sell and close and set up appointments. And, it turns out I ended up having a career in sales decades later. Ended up selling Oracle software for a decade, from inside sales to outside sales to, VP, regional vice president of sales. But my first job in sales was selling Cutco knives. And so I often describe myself as a sales CEO. right? CEOs come from a variety of backgrounds.
Right.
You could be a securities attorney. You could be a brilliant technologist or innovator. Me, I'm a sales guy, and started, back in the days selling Cutco knives, of course.
Let's talk about that for a second. We were talking about from a moment off air, like early on, understanding how to deal with rejection, understanding how to take a no to the face, understanding what a no means and not letting it get you down, and understanding that a no could be a maybe, a no could be a not right now, and understanding there's different types of no's. There's hard no's, there's soft no's. There's definitely, but learning that early on, you get that out of the way, and that builds the calluses of the future, right?
Well, absolutely. I think, rejection is part of the game as a salesperson, as an entrepreneur. I went to UCLA. I dropped out of college. And one of my first jobs out of college was cold calling for a subprime mortgage lender in El Segundo in Southern California. And it was a little bit of a boiler room. Needed to make 400 phone calls with 4 hours of phone time each day.
Wow.
That needed to result in 30 loans closed that you were originating from those cold calls over 6 months before anybody got a promotion to a senior loan officer, where you started making the big bucks. So you'd make $400, a loan for 6 months, and then you could start making $2,000-$3,000 per loan closed when you became a senior loan officer. But one of the things you learn real fast is when you're making 400 cold calls a day for 6 months, the vast majority of those calls are no answers, are hangups, are rejection. And yet what you also learn is that if you stick with it, some very small portion of those cold calls will result in a qualified deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's passed on to the senior loan officer, that gets processed, underwritten, signed, and funded. Maybe it's 1 in 400, but that's actually all it takes to run the business. And so, rejection is part of the game. And I remember my manager at the time used to have this phrase. He said, "Hey, this is a game of rejection. You have to let this rejection flow off you like water off a duck's back." That was the phrase to use, like water off a duck's back.
Water off it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you have to deal with it. It's part of the game.
It is part of the game. And so if you're somebody that doesn't take well to rejection, you're not going to be in sales. You're probably not, meant to be a founder, because being a founder, being an entrepreneur, the vast majority of it is shit breaking, going wrong, getting rejected, worse, right? Which we can talk about. But, it's rough out there, and it comes with the territory.
It's so funny. I mean, it's not even funny. I mean, I'm a recruiter. I do this for a living, and I deal with rejection from business development. I deal with rejection from hiring managers on candidate submissions. And in turn, I teach candidates about rejection, especially in this crazy job market right now, where it's a lopsided numbers game. The odds are not in your favor. And and obviously there's different levels of rejection, right? There's initial rejection, good, get it out of the way. And then there's a tougher one when you get really close to the finish line, whether it be in a interview process or a sales process. Those are the ones that hurt. Like, those are the ones that you put your time and your effort and your emotional and physical energy into. And when those go south, those are the ones that hurt. What advice do you give sales folks out there to deal with the tough ones, the ones where they hit you, like you spent months, maybe a year grooming the sales lead, and you get to the finish line, and for whatever fucking shitty reason it goes south? Like, what could you even tell somebody?
Look, you got to move on. I mean, you really have to move on and not dwell on the past. And, often there's lessons learned, right? Sometimes you run a perfect cycle, you're pitching the right, person in the right company, and it's a competitive bid and you lose to a competitor, and there's nothing you could have done. But more often than not, there's something that you can take away. Maybe you were barking up the wrong tree. And this happens all the time. And I guess the analogy I use, or the example, is, when you're raising money, it's easy to want to believe that every investor is your investor. This is the one that's going to close. This guy has money, she has money. And, founders often get desperate. It's also very common for founders to run out of money. And so you often end up in this desperate situation where you're talking to somebody, you really want them to be your investor. You pitch them, you push them, you convince them to get on call after call, meeting after meeting. And then 3 months later, they don't invest. Turns out they're not the investor. They didn't have the money. They're not your investor. And yet you pushed so hard, you were barking up the wrong tree. And so the lesson is, you really have to spend the time up front deciding who you're going to pursue as a client, as a partner, as an investor. You learn over time to make fewer mistakes, to qualify lead. Because if you pursue unqualified leads, you end up dumpster diving and you end up getting
No, I mean, qualified is a word, and that comes with building up, the life experience. You learn from your mistakes, and one of my favorite cliches is either you're learning or earning, right? And it really applies, and you learn your lessons the hard way. And we talk about this other part, and I talk about it all the time, is resilience. You build up this resilience. What was that first time early in your career that you got punched in the face? So you're like, shit, like, all right, I got to build some resilience up over here.
Well, this is a good one. And by the way, I think that from my perspective and my experience, resilience is the number one key to founder success. I think it's more important than anything. It's more important than your product. It's more important than anything. And people can fight me on it, but I think it's really true. Resilient founders win. It's a game of endurance. It's a game of persistence. It's a game of grit and resilience. So, early in my entrepreneurial career, I had started a social networking site called Film Break. And we made every mistake founders can make. But we raised a couple $100,000. We built a social networking site for filmmakers. We had 10,000 users. And my dream was to go out and raise $1 million from my hero venture capitalist, a guy named Mark Suster, who's still a venture capitalist and very well known, and I think generally well respected, from Upfront Ventures. At the time, he was at a different venture firm. And he had been writing a blog for a couple of years called Both Sides of the Table. And so he was a 2-time exited founder turned venture capitalist, thus, both sides of the table. And I'd convinced myself that if we could get in front of Mark, I could pitch him and we could raise $1 million and really execute our ambitions to make this social networking site, the biggest thing ever and go from 10,000 users to 1 million users and take over the world. Anyways, we get this meeting and I was referred in by a guy named Rob Tursek, who used to be an advisor to Oprah. I said, Rob, do you know this guy, Mark Suster? Oh yeah, Mark's a friend. I said, oh my God, this is my hero. I read his blog religiously. I know if I can pitch this guy, we're going to win. We get the meeting. His office was in Century City on like the 50th floor, pearly white gates of venture capital. Right. And I had hyped my team up, my 2 co-founders, that this is the guy, this is the meeting, this is going to change.
It's a golden ticket. Willy Wonka's golden ticket right here.
And of course, all of this was a mistake, right? In retrospect, which you probably already understand. But nonetheless, we get the meeting and Mark comes in there. He's 10 minutes late. He's on his phone. He puts his shoes up on the desk, as pretty much this what happened. And I'm the pitch guy. I get to slide 2, maybe slide 3, and I'm 1 or 2 minutes into the pitch. He cuts me off. He goes, okay, that's it, Darren. What's that your name? Darren, got it. This isn't happening. This is not going to work. You are not the guys. This idea is junk. I know 3 guys that are actually in the entertainment business that have real backgrounds, and you guys don't have that background. If I told these guys what you're doing, they would absolutely destroy you. You don't have a shot. And he walked out. And the meeting was less than 5 minutes.
And what the?
And then as he turns around before he leaves, he goes, how did you guys get this meeting with me? And I said, well, Rob Tursek, he's one of our advisors. He goes, yeah, Rob's a smart guy. What's he doing with you?
Wow.
He failed. And that was it. And dude, it was like it was so ice cold, that rejection, just a hardcore rejection. We walked out. We went down to a restaurant. I think it was BJ's across the street at the time, the Century City Mall. We each had a beer. Nobody said a word for an hour.
Nothing.
There was nothing to say. We had been completely and totally denied by a venture capitalist who I had deemed my hero. And I was going to go in there and convince this guy, and I was going to tell him that I read his blog and I knew everything he had advised founders. I had done that, but he shut me down so hard. And that was probably the first time any investor had shut me down like that, just completely cold. Years later, he becomes a partner at Upfront Ventures, and part of the mantra there is hey, we're upfront. We don't BS you. If we don't like it, we're going to tell you. And at the time, it's hard not to take that personally. You feel like this is a person that's rejecting you. This guy was rejecting Darren. He's like, Darren, I reject you. You suck. Of course,
personally, of course, you would take that to heart, though.
Business. And, the business ended up not working out. We pivoted. We turned it into an agency. But it turns out, Mark's gut reaction was right. The business wasn't investable, or if it was, it wasn't going to be investable by his firm for $1 million. But that really hurt. And I think, that's just it's again, par for the course. It comes with the territory. And I think a lot of founders that you do end up carrying that baggage for a little bit. Years later, I look back and I was like, you know what? Whatever. Like I'm having success now, and I don't hold a grudge against Mark Suster for rejecting me so hard like that. Do I think he's a punk? Yeah. Do I think he's a bit of an asshole? Yeah. Does he care? No. Like life moves on.
Let me ask you a question.
You have to move on.
Let me ask you a question. Reverse the roles. You're him. You guys come into the room. What you know now, would you have rejected you guys that quickly?
I would have. Now, I wouldn't have been such a jerk about it.
Well,
right?
that's the difference. That's a core. But you would have rejected. You would have declined it. Yes.
Yeah, like I get found. Like I've invested my own capital. I've invested in SPACs and startups and put money into companies. And so I'm on the other side of it too now. Not at the level markets, of course, or a venture capitalist. But I walk away from deals, and you. It's nice for founders to hear a reason, and most VCs, of course, like they ghost you. They just disappear. Like they literally don't get back to you. And somehow that's become common, and it's really gross and disgusting. So I won't be a jerk about it, but I'll say, hey, Adam, this isn't a fit for me. I'm heavily invested in my own companies right now. I don't have liquidity. Hey, Adam, I don't know about this market. I like what you're doing, but I'm just not convinced the market.
It's almost like Shark Tank when they give a reason. And for that reason, I'm out. Like that's how they do it.
But yeah, I would have rejected my own deal. And again, you now, I've taken that experience with me. I'm on to bigger and better things. I've learned a lot about solving problems in bigger markets, and how to pitch and how to raise. And turns out, you really need traction as a starting point. You need the growth of the company and the traction and the milestones to speak for itself. You need the investors, and you want the investors coming to you versus going out and
be
pitching.
Be a magnet.
They're all lessons learned. And I think it builds up resilience over time.
That's a good one. And you've helped your Issuance product has helped raise, companies raise over 300 million. What do you think some of those core mistakes are that companies are making? Are they raising too early? Or is it, as you said before, I think you really summed it up, kind of answering the question, is come with wins and things in the win column before asking, right? Like set yourself up for success.
100%. I think that the key to raising capital is you have to prove to an investor that you can create something from nothing, and that you can actually scale that creation of something from nothing again and again and again. What does that mean? It means you have to go from 0 to 1. You have to build your prototype, build your algorithm, sign a distribution deal, get a letter of intent, generate revenue, acquire your first 100, 500,000 customers without any money, without any help, without an investor.
Sure, you could do it.
Freaking dollar. That's what being an entrepreneur is. And if you think that the way to build a business is to go out and raise capital and then build something, that is not what being a founder is.
You're also in debt to people, right? Like without even trying, we didn't talk about that.
Or you're giving up enormous amounts of equity and ownership and control of your company.
What's the point?
Because some founders do convince investors. They're compelling, or whatever the reason is, and you end up giving up more equity because you don't have the milestones, you don't have the traction, you don't have the growth. So if you convince an investor in that scenario, you're going to give up a ton, and that's not good. So the key is you have to execute. You have to be able to create something from nothing and do it again and again and again. And then an investor says, "Man, that's freaking impressive. This guy Adam is a hustler. He's not going to quit, whether he has money, he doesn't have money, whether I cut him a check or not. This guy's a winner." He's going to go out.
They're looking at the jockey more than the horse.
Always.
Who do you bet on, the jockey or the horse?
The jockey. And I produce a show called Going Public where
we're getting there.
Go for it. The jockey. It's a story of the jockey. That's who people bet on. Even, and then there's these stories of like Sam Bankman-Fried and the aura of like the guy playing, League of Legends. What was he playing? Right. Warcraft. Yeah. And as he's on
nerdery
rugs in the Sequoia offices, and he's ignoring the venture investors because he's playing a video game. And somehow they're like, this is the guy. This is the jockey. This guy's got the gift, But in theory, they're betting on him. And that was a huge miss, of course. But yeah, you are betting on the founder. And why? Why does that make sense? Because the business changes, the business fails, the founder needs to pivot. Usually, things don't go as planned. I've never heard of a forecast that, the 6 months later, you're exactly on target. Your top line, your bottom line, it's an estimate, right? It never goes according to plan. So you have to find founders on the investment side that are resilient, that will fail, that they will not fail, they will not quit. By the way, the only way you fail is when you quit.
Right.
So if you quit, you fail. And by the way, it's okay to fail. It's okay to fail and have a business that doesn't work, start another business. But the only way that happens is if you quit. And so you're looking for the founder that refuses to quit, that against all odds will find a way to succeed and solve the problem, break through to the other side, and make it happen.
Love it. What do you think this fascination or this kind of world we live in now where people are putting founders on a pedestal and this whole ego and aura around it and this self-created founder ego, right? Like, what's that all about? Where they have to be like these celebrity founders, and I see it all over LinkedIn. Everyone thinks it's so glamorous, but calling yourself a founder, I mean, like, it's the cavemen were founders, the first business owners, guys, like those were founders. Those the small business owners were entrepreneurs, right? Like, that's not what it. Why has it become like such a glamorous thing when in reality we all know how much grit and work it takes, and it's not that glamorous?
Well, I think it comes and goes.
Who do we blame?
So like I think that like the founder identity and like the aura of the founder, like it's
Founder
cool
mode.
to be a founder when the market is booming.
Yeah.
Capital's flowing freely and like you can raise $1 million on a stupid pitch deck. Hey, you want to have the status of being a founder. But believe me, like in tough markets, and honestly, today it's a tough market. Right now, it's a tough time to raise capital. It's not as cool to be a founder. Like, it's cooler to be something else because it's tough, it's brutal, and it's not glamorous. And I talk about this all the time on X, and I think people lean into this because the truth is that it's crappy, it's lonely, it's depressing.
You're not
it's
making any
stressful.
money.
There's extreme anxiety. You can't sleep at night. You take antidepressants. I mean, like that's what being a founder is. Like it's rough. And are there moments that are worth celebrating? For sure. Yeah, like when you sign a deal, you launch a show, whatever your milestones are, something cool happens, you should celebrate. But it's definitely not glamorous. And obviously, for the ultra successful founders, it can be. And
Such a small percentage, though.
Everybody's, Mark Bezos and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, like these are, iconic founders and hero founders. But these people have been to hell and back too. Like the average person doesn't realize, like it wasn't just, they weren't winning all the time. Like Musk almost ran out of money. Tesla almost failed in 2008. He was barely able to keep the lights on. So you tend not to see the low points. But believe me, the journeys are mostly filled with low points.
Hey everybody, Adam here from the podcast. Today's podcast is brought to you by the team at Fountain. Fountain is your full-service frontline workforce management platform. I have to tell you, Fountain's offerings are some of the most robust I've seen for any product in the space. They offer full solutions for hiring, managing, and retention. They are truly a one-stop shop focused on the frontline workforce. They also create informative content using their data. For example, they analyze a bunch of data from their fast food chains and created a trend report you could download now on their website. They also have a new ebook out called Frontline Voices. There's a lot to dive into. Certainly check it out. And you could learn more at fountain.com, linked in the show notes. Thank you. Yeah, we need to talk more about those. And that's something I really try to do on the show whenever I talk to founders, is really get to those stories, because I want to de-glamorize it. Right? Like there's what it really, really takes to get there. And before we get into talking about going public, something interesting I saw in your background, talking about sobriety as a competitive advantage. How long have you been sober for?
11 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
May I ask, what was the impetus?
Yeah. So I was selling software. I was a regional vice president of sales, kind of at like the pinnacle of my career in that industry. And I had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like halfway during that career, like year 5 or 6, I was like, I don't want to be selling software into my 50s. I don't want to do it. I want to be a founder. And I had started a marketing agency. Actually, the social networking site, we pivoted that into a marketing agency. And the marketing agency was flailing. It was struggling to generate meaningful recurring revenue. I hired a coach to help me improve my business. And the form of the coaching was a weekly call every Thursday from like 8 to 9 p.m. It was a former manager of mine in the Oracle partner community. So this guy knew me pretty well, knew my capabilities. And at the end of 3 months, my coach, Adam, came through with his recommendations. And he said, Darren, I've listened to you for 3 months. I know you're looking for a breakthrough in your business. I think the way you're going to achieve that breakthrough is to start with a personal transformation. He said, great, Adam, what's the recommendation? He said, I think you should quit drinking for 90 days. And I was like, how's that business advice? I think at first I was offended. I was like, I don't get it, Adam. Like I hired you to help me improve my business.
Were you a heavy drinker? Was drinking a problem for you? Were you more social drinking? Or were you
in my
heavy?
mind, it wasn't a problem. I was probably drinking 3 times a week. I was a big red wine guy.
Okay.
I would have like 2-3 glasses of wine. Maybe on some nights I could go through a bottle of wine. Worst thing I would have was like a hangover on a weekend before like I'd take the family to a farmer's market.
Right.
And I said this to Adam. I was like, Adam, you know me. I don't have a drinking problem. And he goes, well, I know that, Darren. That's why 90 days isn't going to be an issue for you. So he used the old reverse psychology on me. Anyways, I took him up on it. I was like, you know what? Nothing to lose, everything to gain. I went 3 months and I felt good. And I felt pretty good. So I was like, all right, I'll go 6 months. 6 months, I felt great. A year into it, I felt incredible. 2 years into my sobriety, I achieved my business breakthrough. And I was able to leave my career in software sales as a regional vice president of sales, go all in on my own company. My marketing agency started taking off. We went from doing deals from $2,500 a month, campaigns that were generating $5,000 in revenue, to signing clients for $100,000, $250,000, $500,000 projects. And so what I realized is that for me personally, quitting drinking was the breakthrough. And the way I describe it is that I think I improved everything about me by like 1 or 2%. 1 to 2% more productive, 1 to 2% more efficient, 1 to 2% more energy. Wasn't night and day. It didn't happen overnight. And I was I didn't think of myself as an alcoholic. I had a great career. I had a great income, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, leading a sales team. So I was like, I don't have a problem. But it turns out I wasn't operating at my optimum. Like I had room for improvement, and it might have been small, but those small improvements compounding every day, week, month, over 2 years, suddenly I broke through. And after that, I was like, dude, I've achieved my dream. My dream wasn't to be a billionaire. I just wanted to be my own boss. I left my career, which I'd been doing for 10 years. So I said, my sobriety helped me achieve my dream of being a founder. I'm just going to keep going. Like, why would I change? Because this is what I wanted to do. This is what where I wanted to be. And I haven't looked back since.
That's incredible. And it's little, like, even in those times of those 1 or 2%, that's when an opportunity comes and maybe you missed, or maybe you would have handled something slightly differently or said something slightly differently. And that makes all the difference of a trajectory that opens up future opportunities. The butterfly effect.
Totally.
And do you miss it? Do you go out for dinner and you're with friends and family that are drinking, and do you miss a glass of red? Like, do you miss it? Like, how do you process that?
Literally zero. And I guess, and by the way, I don't know if everybody feels that way. I think there's a lot of people that,
of course,
would describe themselves as alcoholics that don't want to be around other people drinking. It's not good for them. They don't want that mental, psychological pressure. For me, I don't miss it at all. And I'm even surprised to hear myself say that, because when I was drinking, I really liked drinking. I liked a good glass of wine. I liked, bringing a bottle to a restaurant. I liked all of it, but I don't miss it. And I think it's like a habit. Like when you wake up and you brush your teeth, do you really think about it? Or are you like, I got to brush my teeth?
You
just do it. It just happens. Like you put on your clothes, you brush your teeth. For me, not drinking has become a habit. And I've replaced the habit of drinking. I drink water. I like lemon water. Like, to me, that's my body feels nourished when I have a glass of cold ice water with like lemon on the top. I'm a happy camper. So no, I could be at a wedding, at a bachelor party. I love Vegas. I try to go to Vegas once every 2 months.
I'll be there in a week from today.
Out, dude. Out at Aria, Cosmo Win, dude. It doesn't matter what's happening around me, where I am. I could be at a club. There could be bottle service. Someone's buying it. I could be buying it, but I'm not drinking. I'm drinking a Red
Good.
Bull. I'm drinking a Virgin Bloody Mary. I'm
Yeah.
drinking Heineken 0.0 or Athletic Brew. I don't miss it at all. And I'm a better person for it.
Good on you. Good.
Thanks, man.
You know, it's interesting you say that. I'm about to go through some medical stuff where I'm going to have to stop drinking for a while. I'm just like you. I'm a social drinker. You know, how we restaurants, dinners, friends, but not like by myself sitting there, you know, like not a problem. And I'm actually really looking forward to it. I'm actually looking forward to a break. I don't know how long it'll last for. I'm just going to go with it and embrace it versus being like it's an issue. Like, oh no, I can't drink. No, like,
Man.
all right, like let's
go for a month. Go for a month. See how you feel.
It'll definitely be a couple of months there, and that's sage advice to everyone out there. So I want to pivot and talk about going public. What is it all about? Give us the trailer. Give us the headlines here.
So Going Public is a show. It's a show where we follow the stories of founders who are building their businesses and raising capital. And for the first time, the viewers of this show can interact. They can click to invest and buy shares in any of the featured companies while they watch the show. And we just signed our biggest deal ever for this company. The show is now being distributed by X,
Interesting.
Twitter, run by Musk. We have a sponsorship with Linda Yaccarino. She's the CEO who reports to Elon. And we pitched her on this show 4 months ago. She said yes in 2 minutes. And she said this is going to be the first business show on X, and it's going to be the biggest show on X.
Wow.
And it's
going from rejections to getting a pitch accepted in 4 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's, well, you know, you earn it, right? So like the Mark Suster rejection was like led to this in some way. But we've been building this platform for 7 years. And I think the idea that drives us is a simple one. Customers deserve an opportunity to be owners and brands. Why can't the customers of Uber, Lyft, Peloton, DoorDash, why can't they invest in those companies pre-IPO before the company goes public? They actually could if those companies allowed them, because there's new rules and regulations in the United States that do
being an accredited investor, all that kind of fun stuff.
You can now invest in startups as a non-accredited investor, but it's not mainstream knowledge. And the deals aren't technically mainstream knowledge because they're not marketed in the right way. So this show is an investor marketing campaign on steroids. It's a way for companies to tell their stories. We run the founders through challenges, right? It is a reality series.
Yeah, how does it work? Let's frame it up there. Like, what is the format? First of all, I've never watched a show on X. Is it like a distribution? Are there channels? You have to watch it real time? Is it replays? How does it work?
It's a totally fair question. So X has actually licensed 15 shows in the last year and a half. Those shows have generated about 600 million views and 1.7 billion impressions. The shows stream on X through what they call the creator account. So our account is at Going Public. X is going to drive somewhere around 20 to 25 million views per episode that streams from that account. So you're watching the show from your phone, from your tablet, or you can watch it at home now because X has an app for smart TVs. So you can download the X app.
It's basically a video distribution channel. Yep.
You know, they're becoming an entertainment platform. And our bet is, well, look, they're the number 1 news app in the United States and internationally right now. Why can't they be the number 1 entertainment app too? And they're innovating at an insane pace. They are probably innovating faster than 99.99% of companies in the world because it's owned by the greatest innovator of all time, Elon Musk.
The Musk mentality.
Like he's a massively successful entrepreneur and innovator. So it's the format is there's 5 episodes, and these are 15 to 18 minute episodes. They're going to be released weekly on X beginning Tuesday, May 6th. So Tuesday, May 6th, episode 1. 7 days later, a week later, episode 2. And then the 5th and final episode of the show is a live stream finale for 60 minutes, where we bring the founders, the talent, the celebrities that you see in the show to bear in a live stream on X. You can interact in real time. There's 3 companies in the season. There's 3 founders, and their stories are told across 5 episodes. Now, during the show, during the series, we run the founders through challenges. And the reason we do this is we learned that if we just document a founder building his or her startup, You just see like a highlight reel. It's really not that interesting. It's like, oh, we're in an office doing a deal. Okay, you and everyone else.
Great.
But if we put those three founders in a boxing ring and the lights go on and suddenly they're in Las Vegas and Floyd Mayweather's in the ring.
Right.
Like, yo, what's up? Pitch me your business. Spar with me. Now you see a founder out of their element.
Right.
See the real person. And we did that for season 2. We have other challenges that will be, released and unveiled in season 3. And these are challenges that are designed to show the entrepreneurial spirit of the founders. So they're challenges tied to themes we've been talking about: resilience, grit, creativity, all of these things that you have to, these are emotions you deal with, but they're also the qualities that make great leaders. And so, tying the loop, this is the profile of the jockey. And of course, there's an investment. You can click through and learn about the deal. And of course, the show
Interesting.
And invest into the deals while you want.
This is pretty damn cool. First of all, like my wheels are spinning in my head because I have not, as a consumer, thought about X as a content distribution, video content distribution. I'm not really big on it. I never thought of it. But if there's something I wanted to watch, I would watch it on there. Now my wheels are spinning. I'm like, it's such a big audience, X. It's global. Why not make it a video? Like that's the logical path there. Brilliant. Great. This is awesome. What is that criteria for a company to be on, to be featured, a founder to be featured? What's that? What are those check boxes for you guys?
It's a good question. So we're generally looking for Series A type businesses. So that means companies that
not pre-seed, something that's baked, a little bit more baked down the line, has some potential, has some early investment,
generating 10, 20, $50 million in annual revenue. So these companies are probably a few years old. They've been to hell and back. They have product market fit. They have a product in market. They have thousands or hundreds of thousands of customers. They're scaling their business. They've probably raised capital. They've probably raised venture capital, but at least they've raised capital. And they're out in they're kind of a growth stage startup. And part of the reason that we're focused on that segment of the market is that startup investing is inherently risky. 9 out of 10 startups do fail. And there's already a show, which is Shark Tank, which I'm a fan of, which profiles like the early stage companies that have ideas, or like, hey, I launched this thing last month.
Very early.
We're doing $500 in sales a week. That's for Mark Cuban to lose his money on, but not us. We want our viewers to have an opportunity to earn real returns. There are risks in investing. Those risks are disclosed, of course. And there's also, financials that the companies have to provide depending on the way they're raising capital, so that the viewer understands the financial reality of the business. But at least these are companies that are further down their path. They're generating millions or tens of millions in revenue.
The bet is a little bit, I shouldn't say safer, but there's more.
A little bit safer.
There are more data points to review when you're an investor.
That's correct. It doesn't mean you're going to turn $1,000 into $10,000. You could lose every time, but it means the companies have been de-risked to a degree. That's correct.
What is that back-end platform that you had to build to make this all operational? Because does something like that exist? Was it plug and play, or you had to create something from scratch?
Well, that's where I'm a what do you call it? Hopelessly addicted founder, right? So one company produces and distributes the Going Public series on X. That's my media company. And that's called Crush Capital. Issuance is my fintech company. That's my software company that is doing all of the back-end processing for the investments for the companies that are featured in the Going Public series. One company produces and streams. One company.
I like the double-sided element of this, Darren. I see what you're doing here.
Yeah, and by the way, I think that's one of the reasons we were able to get to this point is that this has been. It's one of the most commonly pitched ideas out there. Like my partner pitched me on this idea in 2017. Hey, let's make a show like Shark Tank where viewers can invest. Todd, I've heard this pitch 100 times, man. Like you're the 101st guy. Well, where's the show, Darren? I was like, it doesn't exist. Why not? And I realized, well, there's probably 9 or 10 pieces to this puzzle that we would have to assemble to actually bring the show to life. One of those components, one of those pieces is technology. And I happen to have a software company that was developing software for online capital raising. So we knew the ins and outs of the space. I have a brilliant co-founder in my tech company, technical prodigy out in New York. And so, these things are plug and play. They do work together, but they're technically separate entities.
What is the roadblock right now? What's the logjam to making this happen?
Man, that's a really good question. I don't think there are any roadblocks for us at this point. I think the roadblocks again are like mental, right? Because I'm seasoned enough to know that there's no guarantees,
Hmm.
right? There's 100 reasons why this business could fail, but I'm also smart enough to say, well, we just got to deal with X, the 600 million monthly active users. It's owned by the
Hmm.
most talented entrepreneur of our lifetime. It's the most real-time social media platform in the world. This is now our third season. We've learned a lot. We've made mistakes in seasons 1 and 2 that we're not making this time. We think we've got the best format, the best talent, the best celebrities, the best distribution partner, and partners in general to make the show a smashing success. But it doesn't mean, there's not nights where I'm worried about the things that could go wrong, because there's always something that can go wrong. But again, it's how do you kind of solve those problems and just conquer those fears. But no, I don't think there's anything in our way. We're wrapping
Love it.
production season 3. It's going to go out in 2 months, and I think we're going to knock it out of the.
Well, this show is airing at the end of April if you're listening to it right now. So the show's going to be out, going public, will be out in a couple of weeks, right? May 6th, you said?
6th. Yeah, that's
May
right.
6th. Check it out. So I love it. This is interesting, and it's actually going to drive me to tune in because I'm definitely going to check this one out, and everyone at home should check this out too. So let's bring it home here, and I want to give some advice. I want Darren to give some advice here, and you've been around the block too. What is that single greatest piece of advice that you've received that you take action on daily? What is that mantra? What is that thing you say to yourself when you wake up every morning?
Don't quit, right? Quitting is the only way you fail. And there are a lot of reasons that you might want to quit as a founder. And I'll mention this one because it's not a commonly talked about reason, but it happens all the time. Just because you run out of money doesn't mean you should quit. Founders run out of money all the time. Revenue stops, clients cancel contracts, you run out of the money you raised, you can't raise any capital. And I know it seems like the end of the world, but I've battled this challenge myself personally in both of my companies more than once. And we're still alive and kicking, and we're on the verge of our biggest milestone ever because we refuse to quit. And it's scary. It may mean pay cuts for you as a founder. It may mean you have to let some of your team go, and that's never fun. It's horrible to fire people, but there are ways you can break through. Sign a new deal, find one new investor, get a loan, borrow money, take money out from your savings. Maybe you get a home equity line
Do
of
what you
credit.
got to do.
By the way, these are things that aren't fun to do. They're very serious. They're big decisions. They create more pressure, but you can push through. And so just, I guess my closing thought is sometimes the moment you're closest to failing completely is often the moment you're closest to breaking through. But you don't know that until you've broken through. And then you look back and you're like, shit, like that was close. Glad I pushed through, because otherwise we wouldn't be here.
That's where the breakthroughs happen, right? That's where the breakthrough. What's keeping you up at night these days? Besides sick kids.
That's a good question. I guess it's just like typical founder fears. Like we're 7 years in, and there's a part of me that wonders, what if it doesn't work? What if X doesn't deliver this audience? What if investors don't come into the deals, that are, we've put so much time and energy into, and, you so desperately want it to work. It's actually one of the reasons, Adam, why I love having a co-founder in both of my companies. The emotional pressure and the financial pressure is so severe that it's nice to have a partner to lean on when I'm feeling down, I'm feeling nervous or anxious. And by the way, my partners would say the same thing. So usually, like when one of us is depressed or worried, the other one's like, hey man, we got this. Look at what's happened. Look at what we're doing. And then vice versa. When my partner's down, I'll be like, Todd, look how far we've come. So it's always nice to have partners. And, God bless solo founders, man. For you solo founders out there, my hat's off to you. I don't know how you do it.
It's tough.
It's very tough, but there's some of the best companies were built by solo founders. For me, I like having partners. Just too much pressure. Mostly just excited. I'm excited at the future. I'm excited that we stuck with it, that we didn't quit. And had we quit, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be on the verge of launching this show, our third season of this show on X. Would never have dreamed we'd have a partner like that 7 years ago.
That's the good stuff, man. So Darren, let's bring it home here. You have been through it, the ups and downs. I mean, that's really what it's all about in entrepreneurship, right? Like, you have to survive, you have to be resilient, you have to find your cheat codes, your hacks that work for you to bring out your best self. And it's not glamorous. It takes work, blood, sweat, tears, emotional, right? There's people get hurt along the way. This is a scary life that we live, but we choose to do it. And you've reached levels of success, and you talk about milestones. But Darren, at this point of your life and your career, Darren Marble, how do you define success?
It's a really good question. I guess at this point, my goal is to be doing what I'm doing 40 years from now. And that might sound ridiculous. And I don't know that my partners want to be doing this for 40 years. Look, I want to be able to provide for my family and my kids and set a good example for them and show them, that with grit and perseverance and resilience, you can succeed and anything's possible. But beyond that, I think success, I really have a long-term lens of it now. If I'm lucky enough to be my own boss, which was my dream not that long ago, 10 years ago, all I wanted to do was be a founder. I didn't want to work for someone else. I wanted to work for myself. If I can be working for myself in 40 years, that would be the ultimate success, because it means I will have been living my dream for the larger part of my life. And for all the stress and all the anxiety and the challenges, financial, emotional, legal, all of it, that there's something so rewarding about being an entrepreneur and being in control of your own destiny and being accountable to yourself. Obviously, you have investors and boards, but you're really accountable to yourself at the end of the day. And it's a privilege. And if I could have the privilege of doing that for another 40 years, it would be the greatest success.
I love it, man. Good stuff.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. I want everyone, I got to put on my closing music here. Everyone follow @GoingPublic on X. Season 3 premieres May 6th. Check it out. Watch it. I know I'm going to be watching it. Darren, where else could folks connect? Where could they learn more?
Follow me at Darren Marble on X. That's my spot. And I'm always happy to connect with founders and be helpful where I can.
Good stuff. And I'm going to use this episode to get myself back on X in multiple ways. I slack. I am just not doing a good job on that one. Darren, thank you so much for joining me. Hang out with me for a moment here as we sign off. Everyone listening, if this show meant something to you, leave a review. Rating it goes a long way. Sharing means caring. You know where to find out more on the podcast.com. Follow us on Inset at NHP Talent. YouTube over at the podcast. You know where to find us. Remember, be good to yourself, be better to others, and catch us next week for another good episode of the podcast. Take care, everybody.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode soon, jam-packed with more incredible humans. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and sharing. To join the conversation, search the podcast on LinkedIn. And to catch up on past episodes and more info, please visit www.thepodcast.com.